Have you heard about the midlife crisis? Well, this week we have a piece about the afterlife crisis. Welcome to this week's show. We're so glad to have you join Charlie and me for the next hour as we talk about grief as an afterlife crisis with our guest, Phil Cohen. So welcome to Everyone Dies, the podcast where we talk about serious illness, dying, death, and bereavement. I'm Marianne Matzo, a nurse practitioner, and I use my experience from working as a nurse for 47 years to help answer your questions about what happens at the end of life.
And I'm Charlie Navarrete, an actor in New York City, and here to offer an every-person viewpoint to our podcast. We're both here because we believe that the more you know, the better prepared you are to make difficult decisions in a crisis. Also, this podcast does not provide medical nor legal advice. Please listen to the complete disclosure at the end of the recording.
This podcast is a combination of education, entertainment, otherwise known as edutainment, delivered in 3 halves. Our main topic is in the second half, so you can fast forward to that jibber-jabber-free zone if you'd like. In the first half, Charlie has a piece about the Ouija board and our recipe of the week. In the second half, we have a guest, Phil Cohen, who is here to talk about grief. And in the third half, Charlie has a poem written by Kevin Bates. Hi, Charlie. What's new?
Have you heard of this film called Familiar Touch?
No.
It's really, really good. It's this older woman. She's in her 80s, and she's transitioning to assisted living. And you see her mind deteriorating. I mean, it's nothing like crazy or fancy. It's just how, she handles everyday activities. She looks in the mirror and looks confused to see her face covered with wrinkles, like she's never seen that before.
I do that every morning.
Trying to maintain her identity. So this actress, her name is Kathleen Chalfant. She's mostly a theater actress. She's only done a few movies. But I mean, she's just really, really great. And interestingly, this was filmed with people who work in an assisted living community.
Oh.
So the staff and actually some of the patients as well were part of the movie. But like I said, she's losing pieces of her past, but like has one foot in the present. There's no music, like music usually manipulates how you feel and everything like that. There is no music. She's just trying to figure out what's going on. She doesn't get crazy about her dementia. You see her cognitive decline through her eyes. And it focuses on what she's going through now instead of what she's losing. I've just never seen, dementia portrayed like this. It's just really good, and I really recommend it. Yeah, so the name of the movie is Familiar Touch.
Okay.
I saw it in a theater. I'm assuming it's streaming now somewhere.
Sounds good.
But yeah, folks, check out, I don't know, maybe like Netflix or Prime or Apple Plus. It's probably one of those.
Thanks for that recommendation.
Yes. So, for our first half, Everyone Dies travels to Maryland, where the Ouija board got its start in Baltimore. Ouija is a talking board first manufactured in the United States in 1890. The board that became Ouija was born in 1886 in Chestertown, Maryland, and named in 1890 in Baltimore, where it was first manufactured. A Ouija is a board printed with letters and numbers that uses a sliding pointer to spell out messages in a mysterious way. According to Charles Kennard, the first to manufacture the Ouija board, the mystifying oracle received its name in April of 1890 when he, Elijah Bond, patentee of the board, and Helen Peters, a cultured, affluent woman who came from a society background and a strong medium who would later prove to the patent office that the board worked, asked the board what it wanted to be called. The seance occurred in Bond's rooms in what at the time was a boarding house known as the Langham Hotel, located at 529 North Charles. That night at the boarding house, the group waited with their fingers resting on the paddle-shaped planchette and watched as the board spelled out Ouija in response to their query. When the board asked what Ouija meant, the board answered, "Good luck." Today, that building still stands, but now it is home to a less magical 7-Eleven convenience store. For years, all trace of the event that created an entire brand of fun occult devices had been wiped out and all but forgotten, except for the efforts of Ouija historian Robert Murch, founder of the Talking Board Historical Society. Today, you can visit the 7-Eleven and see the historic plaque describing the events of that fateful night that changed the game of popular occultism. Since Ouija's beginning, newspapers reported on its use as a way to communicate with the dead, predict catastrophes, solve mysteries, and even commit crimes. As Ouija's popularity grew in the wake of World War I, newspaper coverage spread about Pearl Curran, a St. Louis housewife who used Ouija to talk with the spirit of a 17th century woman named Patience Worth. Mrs. Curran went on to publish Patience's writings, many of which were met with critical endorsement. And so, our weekly funeral lunch recipe, straight from Maryland, is tomato pie. Tomato pie is delicious as an appetizer or a lunch dish at your next funeral repast. Bon appetit! Please go to our webpage for this week's recipe for tomato pie and additional resources for this program. Everyone Dies is offered at no cost, but is not free to produce. Can we count on you to contribute? Your tax-deductible gift will go directly to supporting our nonprofit journalism so that we can remain accessible to everyone. You can also donate at www.everyonedies.org. That's every, the number one, dies.org, or at our site on Patreon under Everyone Dies. Marianne?
Thanks, Charlie. Afterlife crises are like midlife crisis, only different. When reaching middle age, some people experience a midlife crisis that can include fear about their mortality, question what they've accomplished so far, and what the future holds for them. It's characterized by emotional turmoil and a strong desire for change. An afterlife crisis can occur after the death of a loved one, which triggers reevaluation of life, confronting mortality, and questioning life's achievements. A person may act out of sorrow or be more impulsive and overly sensitive in social situations, and make out of the ordinary or impulsive decisions such as quitting a job or starting a new relationship, selling a home, or engaging in high-risk activities. The transition of a loved one no longer being in their life can trigger doubt about the life that they are living and question the life that they want. An afterlife crisis can become complicated grieving, especially in situations of sudden death or the death of a child. Everyone Dies is pleased to bring to you an interview with Phil Cohen. Phil is a grief coach, speaker, and creator behind The Grief Guy. His viral videos and TED Talks, Transforming Grief, have helped countless grievers transform devastation into growth, connection, and meaning. His message is simple. Grief doesn't have to be a life sentence. It can become the soil where something beautiful grows. After the death of his 14-year-old son, Perry, in a sudden accident at sea, Phil spent nearly a decade exploring every possible way to understand and heal from grief. Frustrated with the overwhelming lack of resources and refusing the tired cliches, he formed a new path, one through a garden. His workshop, The Inner Garden, guides others through loss using a science-based, health growth, and purpose-driven framework. The Inner Garden doesn't hand you stages, asks you to be positive, or push you toward acceptance. Instead, it hands you a living metaphor, an invitation to tend to your inner world like a garden. to pull weeds, nurture the soil, weather the storms, and plant new seeds when you're ready. And now, my interview with Phil Cohen. Hello, I'm here today with Phil Cohen. About 10 years ago, his 14-year-old son, Perry, was last seen with a friend on a boat heading out to the Atlantic Ocean. The boys were searched for 7 days, and the boat was found capsized, but the boys were never seen again. Phil learned a lot about grief, including the Kubler-Ross stages were developed for people who were dying and not for those who were grieving. So be sure to check out the show notes to get a link to podcasts that we've done about grieving and how Kubler-Ross doesn't apply, and the link to Phil's TED Talks and all his other social media. So on behalf of Everyone Dies, I want to welcome you, Phil, and thank you for talking with us.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to be here. I appreciate it.
So when this first happened, do you remember how you felt about Perry's decision to go out on the boat that day?
Oh, well, so at the time that it happened, I was actually in California visiting my brother, and I got a call from my wife at the time saying that he was missing, and then obviously I was on a plane, the next plane out, and there early the next morning. At some point between that phone call and getting on the plane, one of my best friends texted me the very first breaking news article, like the very first one. And I remember seeing that, and everything just became so real. I felt, the first thing I felt was fear. I was scared, definitely panicked, didn't have all the information, and just wanted to get home and find him as soon as possible.
I've talked with other people whose family members in different relations have died, and sometimes they talk about feeling angry toward the person who died. Did you have any? And I know with my kids, when they would do something that I might consider not a good choice, that I initially be mad at them, like, why did you make that choice? And but only after I've, resolved whatever that issue was. But I can remember that I sometimes get mad at them, and other people have reported that too. Did you find with Perry?
So no, at first, because like I said, I got the call and didn't really have the details. And now, in retrospect, then I wasn't really angry at any point because it was more like, what happened? Like, how did all these things happen? So once I found out the details, it really wasn't, yes, it was definitely partly his decision because he was on the boat. It was his decision to be on the boat. There was definitely some, pressure, peer pressure, I think that was involved. But ultimately, that would be the only thing. Like, why didn't you, just be strong enough not to get on if you didn't want to go? Because they were not supposed to go in the ocean. So in Jupiter, it's a boating community. They have everybody lives on the canals, and almost everybody that lives in that area has a boat, and many, because it's not a law for a 14-year-old to have a boat. It's not even a law for them illegal for them to go out in the ocean, which is insane to me. But they can. So I was never really angry at him, maybe for a moment, but now that I know everything, it really wasn't about anger. And I've often found that anger is such a surface level feeling, right? Like, I think it's almost like slightly a bit of a cop out, because I think below the anger, might be some other things that, the feelings that might more accurately describe that, what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what did you find out in terms of him being where he was and heading out to the ocean?
The details of the story are literally, like I said, it would take me hours to explain to you. But in the end, they made a bad choice. They decided to take the boat out into the ocean. Unfortunately, in South Florida, there are storms, these freak storms that come out of nowhere, and then they leave out of nowhere. And there was a storm carrying 40-mile-an-hour winds and heavy rains, and the engine seized. They eventually, really, I don't know, which is really a very difficult part of this, not knowing exactly what happened and to even have to think about the possibilities. But what I do know is that the engine seized, and then if you know anything about boats, once your engine's done, you're basically a sitting duck. Once the boat goes sideways and a wave comes, the boat would be capsized, which is what happened. So yeah, I don't have all the specific details of exactly what happened afterwards, but based on people calling in to 911 and all of the reports that I received afterwards, I can piece together, bits and pieces of it.
Do you ever harbor a fantasy that some boat or ship came by and got them and he's living someplace else since you never saw the boat?
I mean, maybe fleeting, because based on, the chances of that are, when you look at all the options, right? Like, did they have to float and then suffer until they couldn't float anymore? Did they get eaten by sharks? There's lots of sharks in that area. Did somebody take them for not good purposes? Pulled them out of the water. And it's horrible to have to think about your child being in any of those circumstances. There may have been a moment where I've thought about it, but in my heart, I don't think that's the case.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You work with people who are grieving, and I have too, where people will sort of construct, quote unquote, fantasy about where their child is. And
yeah.
Is where they didn't have that opportunity, if you will, to see the body and really have the brain know that the child has died.
Yes, and one of the reasons I did the TEDx talk is because, at some point, rather than letting the grief consume me, I decided to start studying it and figuring it out. And it is insane how your brain has to construct some sort of a story. And it makes perfect sense to me even now, looking back after learning it, because of the fact that there are so many timelines, places involved in exactly what happened in the story, that it was difficult for me to even explain it to, the Coast Guard in the beginning, and then maybe, people afterwards. And I got so frustrated to the point that I built a website for myself, so that when I would this person's name, if I click that person's name, then I would get all the details of that person and everything that they said, and trying to piece it together, but my brain did need some sort of a story for me to be able to even sleep. But while I'll never know for sure the story, I have to be okay with that, right? I choose not to let that drive me insane. I mean, as I'm a Christian man, and I know where my son is, and that to me, I think, brings more peace than trying to hope that he's on an island somewhere and that I might see him again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I am impressed that I hate the whole concept of a grief journey, but I understand the concept of a grief journey and where you begin, and all the different things that we do. And some people choose destructive kinds of ways of coping. And some people build a website and teach themselves about grief and figure out, sort of almost in an academic way, how to go through or process the grief and process such a tremendous loss. And so I think for our listeners, it's good to hear a variety of stories from people about what they did to help them figure out, well, okay, so that's how Phil did it. And now I'm going through whatever I'm going through. What can I take from Phil and apply to my own life?
Yeah. And like, I wish I could say this in like a short way. Ultimately, I think, the shortest way, to say that would be, I think, you have to tend to these pieces, right? Like you have to pay attention. It's not avoidance; it's paying attention to the things that actually heals over time. You mentioned, the word choose, and a lot of people I work with. I mean, the fact is, and for anybody that's lost anybody, that we do have a choice. Yes, of course, you're going to hurt. You're never going to forget them. Those times are always going to be there. I still cry, but I have a choice. I can choose to either focus on all of the parts of me that died with my son that day, or can choose to focus on all of the parts of him that he left in me. And it makes me a lot happier to focus on the parts of him that left in me, that live in me. And with regard to the academic approach, what I found was like, once you know and once you understand what grief actually does to your brain, what it does to your body, it makes it a lot less because so many people think they're going crazy, like that they don't understand the brain fog. They don't understand why their body's hurting, and they don't understand why they're making weird noises at night, and so many other things. And there's a lot of pieces to tend to, right? Like this thing breaks your relationships. It breaks your emotion. It takes hold of your vices. It destroys your strength and your identity. So, it depends on like where somebody is, right? What needs to be tended to first. But after working with people for so long, I realized that one, you can never do this in 1 or 2 or 3 sessions because there really is so much to cover it, even down to like, what do you say, if you've lost a child, what do you say when people say, how many kids do you have? There's just so many parts of it that people don't know, and it's not taught anywhere. You know what I mean? There's not a lot of resources out there. The very long answer is really one. I'd say is you can't, if you avoid it, it will find its way out of you one way or another. It will come out through your spirit. It will come out in your body through diseases and aches, or it'll come out of you emotionally in some way. So it's either, the thing is coming with you, right? It's coming with you no matter where you go. Your choice is, do you want to be the driver or the passenger?
Well, I always tell people that, you can say I'm not going to grieve, or you can say I'm going to defer that to later, but it's still going to burble around within you. And I always use the Shrek line, better out than in. Of course, he's talking about, bodily gas, but with grief, it's better out than in. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. Scream, cry, jump, laugh, spin, like do something, move your body. Like if you sit there, it will consume you.
What do you say to people? And I read this in Facebook groups a lot, where they say, my son or my daughter have died, and I just want to die with them. What do you say to?
It makes perfect sense, is what I say. And I understand that feeling. I felt the same way. And the fact is, a part of you did die. in any relationship, there's the you part, right? There's the them part, and then there's the us part.
Mm-hmm.
And when you lose that us part, you lose so much, right? You lose everything you had, everything you hoped for. And I remember thinking, that day, you died, but so did I, but they just didn't bury me, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But so you you're never going to be the same person after going through, I think, such very traumatic event. But it doesn't mean you can't be better. So it's not like trying to get back to who you were. I hate the whole new normal. Like, I hate that saying, but it's just because the fact is, that there, joy and grief can coexist.
Yes. Yes. I have a hate relationship with the new normal too, because I've had patients say to me, "I had nothing wrong with the old normal. I don't need a new normal."
Right. Yes, for sure. Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned, even just briefly touched on the 5 stages. Like, it's even today, they're still being taught, and it doesn't make any sense to me that it's just, I don't. The only excuse I can make for it is that people, one, they don't know what else to do to help that person, and they need some neat little 5-step tidy way to walk them through. But there's what about guilt? What about revenge? What about, there's just so many different feelings that aren't covered in the stages, and I remember feeling all those things in the same day.
Mm-hmm. Or I think people are looking for a plan. It's like, well, if I have a plan, if I can, check this off, then I know where the end is.
Yes.
And I always tell people there is no end. And they're like, don't say that. Well, it's true. There is no end. You will grieve that death forever. And I think that's part of what we offer to people too, is to say, I know what you want, but in 20 years, one of the examples I use, my father used to always chew juicy fruit gum, and he died when I was 15, and I'm in my late 60s now, but if I smell juicy fruit gum, I kind of look around, because I get, that smell triggers that memory. And
absolutely.
So, do you think, well, I'm truly insane if after, 50 some years that's my reaction, or
not at all.
Or is that normal? And so, work like you do and we do is like, no, this is normal. This is to be expected. Don't freak out when it happens, and don't think that you're not quote unquote doing it right.
Totally. I mean, even like a couple of years ago. I mean, I even recently, like 8 months ago, I was at my mom's 80th birthday. All my cousins were there, and I was sitting next to my mom, and I was looking at all of them playing in the yard, and I just started crying. I was like, this sucks. Like, this Perry should be here. Like, this sucks. And those things are going to happen. I mean, and it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. And in some way, I don't want them to go away. Like, I will always remember him. Yes, it makes me sad, but to think he's not here. But yeah, and that's why I continually speak his name and I talk about him. I don't care if it makes other people awkward. That's their problem. But I remember it was probably only a couple of years ago. I was in the grocery store and I saw fruit roll-ups that he used to like, and that was a grief ambush, if you will, and those things, they come.
And kind of take that moment and think about him and think about how they smell and whatever, and say, that was part of my life, and that was a happy time, and I'll have other happy times, but I won't have that one.
Exactly. Yes, 100% is is to definitely, to feel the thing is, so basically it's, one thing I'll talk to the people that I work with is, even turn to it may sound silly, but these things help. And just asking, say, okay, grief, what are you trying to show me today? I mean, something that simple. Instead of running from the monster, because if you keep running from it, it just grows and gets stronger and bigger, and then now you're facing a boss. So, if you just it doesn't have to be all the time, but every once in a while, take the brave step of being okay. Like, what are you trying to show me? And all of a sudden, it gets a little smaller and a little and less scary and things like that. So even simple steps like that are helpful.
Right. So it's been almost 10 years since Perry disappeared. Did you find that there were particular years that were difficult? And I let me give you background for why I'm asking this. We have a few podcasts of like the first year of grieving and the second year of grieving and the third year of grieving, because different things happen in those years.
Yeah.
And, we haven't really done a podcast past the third year of grieving, but, for your 10 years, what, from that perspective of time, have you learned?
Yes. So, and just in my own experience and with working with others, probably like you've experienced, first year is, extremely difficult. Oftentimes the second year is even worse. And I don't know how many times you've spoken about this, on your podcast, but, obviously the numbness wears off and the reality sets in that they're really gone. And it's oftentimes the second year is the hardest. But I'd say, initially when you first asked me that question, the first thing that came to mind was on his 21st birthday. It's for two reasons. One, I did remarry, and since then, my wife would ask me, on his birthday or, on the day that he died, like, what are you going to do today? Do you want to do something? Like she wanted to be involved, but I really didn't want her to be involved. I kind of had the mindset of like, you don't understand, and I don't want you to see me ugly cry and any of that. But on his 21st birthday, I decided to change that, and we both went to a marina, and we had we had some food and some shots, and got one for Perry, and we were toasting him, and I was just lost it. Just lost it. And but I'm glad that I actually did share that, because that opened up a certain space between my wife and I. And it's just every time you do those things, it's helpful. But that one, for some reason, was the first one that came to mind when you asked me that, because I remember it was just a lot came out that day.
Yeah. Well, that's a milestone birthday, and sort of like they're supposed to be. They're not at 21 adults, and Perry would be considered, you're a man now, you can do these independent things, and I can see where that would be a real difficult one.
And then, but the other thing that I found, I don't know if you found this too, was like, just even around, it took me a while to even realize it, even around his birthday, sometimes I find myself like getting sad, but I know when his birthday is, but sometimes I didn't make the connection, so it's just interesting how your body remembers these things.
Right. Or you have an extremely off day and you're snapping at people and everything feels like it's on your last nerve. And then you notice the calendar and you say, that explains that.
It's so true. It's just, it's so true. Yes. Yeah.
So since Perry and his friends' bodies were never found, did the families, and did you have a funeral for them?
Yes. So, I mean, we had a memorial for Perry, and I'm not, 100% sure what the other family did in terms of a memorial, but there's a statue out at the Jupiter Inlet, like a beautiful bronze statue that the other boys' family put there in remembrance of them. But yes, that was tough not to be able to actually have anything, even though I know, he's not in the body anymore, but to even like have a place, to go, whether it be a cemetery or something like that. Again, even though I know they're not there, but it just adds to the dynamic of making it a little difficult. But that's my family and I. We did have our own memorial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you have a spot that you've designated for, like a resting place or a place that you say this represents the resting place?
Yeah. So when I go to Florida, I always go out to the Jupiter Inlet where they left, and there's kind of like, a walkway there, and it was very close to there that I know that they went into the water. So that's kind of the place where I feel is most close to that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's not much, I live in San Diego now, but, Perry did visit me. My brother lived here at the time, and we would come and visit him, and I have some memories, like one of being on the Ferris wheel with him at Santa Monica Pier, so sometimes we'll visit that, so I'll go to memories in different spots that we've done here now that I'm here, but yes, that place is the closest place that I feel that. The Jupiter Inlet. Mm-hmm.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I know it's probably not easy to talk about these things. Is there a last thought that you want to share with the listeners?
Sure. I would say, regardless if anybody is listening that is experiencing loss, if you feel barren, I promise you something is growing, even if you can't see it yet, even if you can't feel it yet, even if everything around you feels dead or hopeless or numb. There's life that grows underground, and before it breaks through the surface, it's there. So every act of presence and every small moment of care, every time you show up for yourself, even when it feels like nothing, it matters. That's what I would say.
Thank you. I really appreciate you talking with us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne and Phil. Listen, I look forward to hearing more from Phil.
Thanks, Charlie.
In our third half, attributed to Kevin Bates, grief is sneaky. One song, one scent, one picture will make you break down. And with that thought, thus ends another episode of Everyone Dies. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned. This is Charlie Navarrete. And from poet and playwright William Shakespeare, to weep is to make less the depth of grief.
And I'm Marianne Matzo, and we'll see you next week. Remember, every day is a gift.
This podcast does not provide medical advice. All discussion on this podcast, such as treatments, dosages, outcomes, charts, patient profiles, advice, messages, and any other discussion are for informational purposes only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Always seek the advice of your primary care practitioner or other qualified health providers with any questions that you may have regarding your health. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard from this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. Everyone Dies does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, practitioners, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned in this podcast. Reliance on any information provided in this podcast by persons appearing on this podcast at the invitation of Everyone Dies or by other members is solely at your own risk.